In the world that we live in today, the phrase living your best life now has kind of made its way into our vocabulary. The problem is, as we've walked through the book of James, we can see how that's not necessarily in line with the way that God has called us to live. Let me explain. I know that whenever we talk about riches and money and things like that in our culture, most people get to that point and tune us out, right? Nobody wants to hear about the way that they should be spending their money or living their life or handling their possessions. But ultimately, when we look at these verses, these are verses that go out to the rich, to the people with means. And when we walk through this last chapter of James, James has some very stern warnings. I want to jump back into the chapter that we read last time, where we talked about the idea of knowing what's right and still not doing it. See, James sets that idea up as he transitions to James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. Now, he was talking to people who are believers and people who have means, but the problem is they find more value and meaning in those means than they do in what God has called them to do. Today, we're going to look again at James 5, verses 1 through 6. And the title of this section is called A Warning to the Rich. Let's jump in, because these are some strong words and I really want to get into fleshing out what they mean. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are to come upon you. Again, strong words right off the bat. Weep and howl for the miseries that are to come upon you. He's talking about Christ's return. He's talking about being judged. And he's saying it is going to be so bad. You should be weeping and howling now. You should be repenting of it now and following what God has called you to do. Your riches have rotted. Strong language. Your garments are moth-eaten. They do not last. They are not eternal. They are of this world, and they will surely perish. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you. Wow. Your gold and silver have corroded, again, showing you these things are not eternal. And as a matter of fact, if your gold and your silver decay because you've been trying to store up these treasures here on earth, which is the very next line, you have laid up treasure in the last days. He's saying that this is going to be evidence, exhibit A, against you. God is giving you these things to bless other people. The entirety of this book has been about putting our faith into action. At the very beginning of the book, James talked about showing that sin of partiality, taking care of those with means versus those with not. And that's to people who are in a church. But the people that have the means, he's giving this warning like, dude, if you're holding and hoarding all of these goods for yourself, God's going to condemn you for it. And it's going to be exhibit A in your courtroom scene when you are face to face with the holy and righteous judge of the universe. Again, I get it. These are strong words, and there's no way for us to say, well, this amount of money needs to go to that, and that amount of money needs to go to this. And there's no way to do that. That's a really quick way to get legal on this, right? Legalistic on this. And that's not the heart behind it. It's not about us telling you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? That's not what God wants. God wants your heart. And if you're saying that your treasures are more important than serving the needs and taking care of others, right? He's saying then your heart is not in Christianity. It's not the same heart that Jesus showed when he stepped out of heaven to serve us, the sinners. And this picture, right, it gets even crazier as we flesh this out, because now he's transitioning. He's going to go from this idea of just not helping and serving others to people whose heart is just in acquiring means and not doing it in a way that is righteous, doing it in a way that is actually corrupt and deceitful. He says in verse 4, he says, "Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you." If you've ever taken advantage of somebody, if you've ever earned something by a deceitful manner, God is saying, I hear them. I hear their cries. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the Lord of hosts. God knows. God knows the desires of our hearts. God knows our intentions. God knows what we are doing. And if we are deceiving others, ultimately, again, our heart is not focused on God, but it is focused on deceitfully and corruptly earning means by which we are going to turn around and then hoard for ourselves. James wraps these last two verses up by giving a picture that we really need to flesh out and understand. Because a lot of times we think that taking care of our money and our finances to pass on to our kids and their kids, we usually think that's a good thing. We usually think that that's not something that's bad. Most of us would say that we are being pretty responsible. But this warning that's about to come in verse 5, this is something that we should look over and then turn around and ask ourselves, do I fit either of these two things? Am I hoarding things for myself, or am I deceitfully earning things? Am I trying to gain riches in a manner that is evil? This picture that James paints in verse 5 is pretty crazy. He says that you have lived on the earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You are living your best life now. You have fattened your hearts for the day of slaughter. He says you are like a cow that is just eating and eating and eating and getting fatter and getting fatter and getting fatter. And by the time that it comes for the slaughter, it's game over. He says that you are living your life for yourself. And when judgment comes, it is going to come swiftly. And you will have just consumed and fattened up your heart for the day of slaughter. There's a lot of prosperity teachers out there that are saying that you deserve to be rich, that God wants you to be this or to be that. And if you are in that position and you are giving back and you are serving others and you are doing it rightfully, then you are a blessing and you are living this out exactly the way that James says we should be living it out. But if we're in this position where we are just hoarding wealth for ourselves and we are even using means that are deceitful to acquire that wealth, we are fattening our hearts for the day of slaughter. Bro, that is a scary, scary picture. And if we are living our best life now, then we really need to look at what it is that we are doing. Otherwise, we need to start weeping and howling for the miseries that are to come. Go out, bless others, live your life in a manner according to the gospel. This has been your moment of grace. Guys, I love you, and I cannot wait for this season of quarantine to be over. I told you guys last time that if you hang around for the next moment of grace, we are going to get you guys the next book that we are walking through. And it's really, really hard for me to narrow down these other 65 books of the Bible to one. But I feel like one of the books that it would have a lot of application and be really helpful and beneficial to us would be the book of Ephesians. And we are going to be walking through that so that we can be able to trust in God's sovereignty, in God's goodness, in God's gracious mercy, and also talk about things like the armor and the sword of the Spirit, right? Like all these awesome things, the armor of God. I'm sorry, forgot that part out. But it's super exciting. I can't wait to jump into the book of Ephesians with you guys. We have one or two left. I'm going to kind of try to wrap this up next time if I can. And then we will be jumping in to the book of Ephesians. We are getting close to the end of the month. As a matter of fact, I think by the airing of this, it will be the end of April. At the beginning of this month, I asked you guys to hit 200 subscribers. I will get back to you and let you know if we hit that. We should be hopefully, right, getting close if we went out and we were sharing the good news during this crazy time. All I ask, guys, is that you be patient with me, right? I'm kind of trying to record these things ahead of the game. And as soon as we get that news, I will let you know. I will do a real quick shout out video and I will get you guys the reward for that, which is like punishment for me. But we will get that to you guys as soon as we can. If you've enjoyed these videos, you've learned through them, and they have been a blessing to you, make sure you like and subscribe. That'll be right here. We'll have a playlist for you over here of other moments of grace from the James series. And over here, we will have our latest uploaded video. I love you guys. I will see you all very soon. Laters.